Hello everyone, Daz here, and welcome to another Slider Revolution tutorial video. In this one, which follows directly on from our previous rapid fire overview video, we'll be digging deeper into the basic fundamentals of Slider Revolution. We'll also take a closer look at the relationship between modules, slides and layers, and as we do, we'll learn more about using the module editor. As we've shown previously, everything in Slider Revolution begins with a module. So let's start with a fresh and empty module by clicking the New Blank Module button, then Quit Guide. This opens the module editor. We'll be going over all the different sections of the module editor throughout this video. First though, let's start with the top toolbar. The top toolbar spans from the back button, which is used for exiting the module editor, all the way to the right where you see this question mark icon. The icons to the right of the question mark icon relate to different settings that you access via the sidebar, which we'll get to in a moment. The first menu item I want to look at in the top toolbar is the Slides menu item. Hovering your cursor over it reveals a drop-down menu. You can see there's an option there to add a new slide. Hover over that and you get 4 different options for adding a new slide. You can add a single blank slide, which is pretty self-explanatory. Bulk slides enables you to create multiple slides at once by selecting a bunch of images from your WordPress directory that serve as the initial background for those slides. The final 2 options enable you to import existing slides from either an existing module of yours or from one of Slider Revolution's templates. The Global Layers option allows you to create a layer that appears on all slides, which we'll talk about more later when we go over how layers work. After the Global Layers menu item, the slides that are already in your module will be listed. This slide was automatically generated the moment we created a blank module because every module must contain at least one slide, no matter what. We'll talk more about slides in a moment too, but before that, let's take a quick look at the sidebar on the right side of the module editor. The sidebar has 4 main tabs that you can switch between to make various changes to your module, to your slides, or to your layers. Right now we're on the Module General Options tab. There are a bunch of options available here such as title, layout, content, defaults, general and so on. Clicking on any of these options will give you access to that options related settings. You can do things here like give your module a name, control the overall module layout, set slide defaults, and so on. All of the settings in this tab are module level settings. That means any changes made while in the Module General Options tab will apply across the module as a whole, and that includes to any and all slides you have in your module. The next 3 tabs are the Navigation Options tab, the Slide Options tab, and the Layer Options tab. We'll look at each of these tabs in a moment once we have a little more context about what they relate to. The top toolbar and the sidebar are fundamental sections of the module editor. The other 2 fundamental areas of the module editor are the canvas, which is this blank area here where all your design work will take place, and the timeline, which is this entire area below the canvas. Let's go back and hover over the slides drop-down menu once again. Notice that our auto-generated blank slide is highlighted blue. That means it is currently selected. Clicking on any slide you see listed in this drop-down list will select it. A slide is like a single page, or in the case of Slider Revolution, a single canvas where your design work happens. Our current slides canvas is empty of content right now, but a single slides canvas can be filled with all kinds of creative media, such as text, videos, and so on. A slider, on the other hand, is a particular type of module that is designed to flip through or transition between multiple slides. That is, a slider is a module that can be used to view multiple slides one after the other. For that, you need to have multiple slides in your module. There are plenty of slider module templates that you can use. Just look under the slider category to find one you like. Templates offer quick access to pre-made slide content as well as pre-configured animations for transitioning between slides, which can save you a lot of time and effort when making your slider. If you want to build a slider yourself from scratch though, start by clicking New Blank Module, then Start Guide, and then select a module type of slider in the very next screen you get. If we go back to the sidebar, the second tab from the right is the Slide Options tab. Clicking on that brings up a bunch of options. Clicking on any one of them, such as background for example, will give you a collection of settings that you can use to control specific elements on your currently selected slide. In this example template, if I hover over the Slides menu item, you can see there are 6 different slides available in the drop-down list. If I select each slide one by one, notice that the settings in the right slide options sidebar change to reflect the settings of the currently selected slide. That's because the settings you see there only apply to the currently selected slide. As these are slide-specific settings, you can make changes to whichever slide you currently have selected without affecting any other slides you have in your module. To the left of the Slide Options tab is the Navigation Options tab. The settings here are used to set up how people navigate between one slide and another. You can choose to use clickable arrows, bullets, you can add thumbnails to your slides, and you can set up touch swiping between slides, and so on. The tab to the right of the Slide Options tab is the Layer Options tab. There's nothing there right now because we haven't selected any layers yet. So let's talk about layers, and for that, let's go back to our new and empty module for a moment. Just as you get a default automatically generated slide for every module, so too do you get a default automatically generated layer for every slide. If we look down to the timeline, you'll see a horizontal line with the title Slide BG Animation. This represents our first layer. In a brand new blank module, it will be the only layer that you can see. You'll also see the Slide BG Animation layer in any template you open as well. The Slide BG Animation layer is always visible at the very top of the timeline, and that's where it will stay. You can't move it and you can't delete it. Right now we haven't added any media to our Slide BG Animation layer yet, and that's okay. You can leave it empty if you want to, or you can change its color. Put a video on it, or customize it in any other ways that you want. Just know that any content you add to it will always be displayed behind the content of any other layers that you add. To add new layers, go to the top toolbar and hover over the Add Layer menu button. The first 7 options you see there are media layer types. By that, we mean they're layers ready-made for certain types of content. For example, the text option adds headlines or paragraph-like blocks for you to put in text content. The image option adds a layer you can use to add images like photos and illustrations. The button layer type allows you to add an interactive strip of text that you can apply custom styling to. You can use this to create objects that are meant to be clicked on. The shape layer type allows you to create resizable rectangular shapes. You can use these to create backgrounds that sit behind other elements, or overlays to tint images, and so on. The video layer type lets you embed videos that you've uploaded to your own website or from third parties such as YouTube or Vimeo. The audio layer type lets you embed audio files that you've uploaded to your site. The icon SVG layer type lets you choose scalable vector graphics, such as those available via Slider Revolution's included SVG library or any of your own. Below the media layer types, there are some additional options. Use the row option if you want to add a grid layout to a layer. By default, the grid is split into 3 equal width columns, but you can change that to any number of columns with any width that you would like. You can also stack multiple rows to create any configuration of grid that suits your design. The group option allows you to connect multiple layers together. Grouping layers helps you to organize your timeline and can be used to move multiple layers on your canvas at once as if they were a single layer. The Layer Library option allows you to import a new layer from a collection of pre-made layers, most of which feature animations. Using this option will often import a group of several child layers, since multiple layers are often needed to facilitate whatever styles and animations the pre-made layer offers. The Import Layer option allows you to import a layer from any other slide in any other module that you've already installed on your site. If there's a layer in one of Slider Revolution's templates that you want, just create a module from that template first to make it available for import. The row and group layer options provide special layer functionality, which is why we think of them as special layers. There is also a third special layer option, which we call global layers, and you'll find that in the slides drop-down menu. Global layers are layers that appear on every slide. This is an example of content on a global layer: the Your Next Vacation in text line, the image of the traveler, The Book and Adventure button and its subtext line are all content on a global layer, and so they all remain visible even as each slide transitions to a new one. You can think of content on a global layer as kind of a unique floating slide, in that it is content that will always be visible regardless of which slide is being viewed. That's why the option is selected from the Slides menu rather than the Add Layers menu item. Here I've brought in a template that has quite a few layers already added. You can now see we have a bunch of different types of media on the canvas. Likewise, in the timeline, you can see we now have a bunch of layers too. Each layer represents one piece of media on our canvas. Layers stack on top of each other in order from top to bottom. Their sorting order in the timeline matches their sorting order on the canvas. For example, on the canvas you can see the iPhone image is currently positioned above an angled, rounded blue background image. If we look down in the timeline, the iPhone image layer is positioned above the background rounded image layer. Let's swap them around. To select a layer, you only need to click on it. To move it though, you need to click on it and not release the mouse button. You can then drag it anywhere you want. Notice a thin blue line appears as I move this layer around. That blue line shows where in the stack the layer will be inserted once I release my mouse button. Releasing the mouse button completes the move. So now I've moved the layer with the iPhone image on it below the layer that relates to the background rounded image. You can see on the canvas that the blue rounded background image is now being displayed in front of the iPhone, because in the timeline it is now positioned above the iPhone image in the stack of layers. Put simply, the top to bottom sort order of the layer stack in the timeline matches their front to rear display on the canvas. The one exception to this sort order rule is the Slide BG animation layer. The Slide BG animation layer is always rendered below all other layers, even though it is always positioned at the very top of the layer stack. So we've seen you can select any layer by clicking on it in the timeline. You can also select a layer by clicking on its corresponding media item on the canvas. Note that you can easily see what you're going to select before you click it, because as you hover over the layer, whether on the timeline or on the canvas, a blue line box will appear around the corresponding media item. As soon as you select any layer, the Layer Options tab, one of the 4 main tabs in the sidebar that we mentioned earlier, will open up. Every layer has its own settings. Auto displaying the Layer Options tab for any layer you select makes editing layers faster and more efficient. But to be sure you don't get confused about which layer you're editing, always check that the layer you have selected is the one you want to edit before making changes to any settings here. Going back to the canvas, you can move any media item on the canvas quickly and easily. Just click on it, hold your mouse down, drag the item, then release your mouse button where you want to drop it. You can also resize any layer on the canvas. First, click the layer to select it, then look for a white drag handle that should be visible on the bottom right of the highlighted layer. If you don't see the drag handle, like I don't here, then just go to the Layer Options tab and select a different settings option, such as the size and position option. Now that we have our drag handle, all you have to do is click on it, hold your mouse down, resize it how you would like, then release the mouse button to commit the change. Right-clicking on any layer will automatically select that layer and will make a context menu appear. From here, you can copy the layer, paste a copy of the layer, duplicate the layer, or make other changes to the layer's attributes. You can also press the spacebar to start a slides animations on the canvas without having to preview it in a preview window, which is pretty handy. You'll notice when we do that, when we play an animation, a purple playhead moves from left to right along the timeline. In the purple flag at the top of that, you can see a timer counting along as it moves. That is showing us a time marker in the animation, which helps us to more easily spot the state of any layer at specific times during the animation. The purple flag itself moves along a horizontal timescale. The animation starts at 0 and in this example ends at 0009, which is 9 seconds. The entire horizontal line of a layer, which includes the name of the layer as well as the animation strips within it, is what we refer to as a track. That is, a track is the entire horizontal line in the timeline that represents the layer and how it behaves over time. The short grey bars that you see in each track are what we call animation strips. These animation strips represent something about that layer changing over time. The left end of an animation strip marks the point where the change to the layer begins. The right edge represents when the change ends. The amount of time the animation goes for in total is represented by the width of the animation strip. The wider the strip, the longer the animation will be. Animation is a fundamental aspect of using slider revolution, and it's made as simple as can be. If you go to the Layer Options tab and click on the animation option that you see there, a number of animation settings appear in the sidebar. This is where you set up and control all of your animations. To create an animation, first decide on a starting point for where your animation will begin, and then decide on an ending point for when your animation will conclude. These are set in the keyframes area under the anim from setting for the start point, and the anim to setting for the end point. For example, you might set a text layer's starting state in the anim from settings to be yellow, small, and on the left side of the slide. You might then set its finishing state in the anim2 settings to be blue, large, and on the right side of the slide. Slider revolution will then automatically handle the transition from yellow to blue, the change in size, and the shift in position to create a smooth animation. By default, each layer only has 2 animation strips. The first one animates its entrance into the slide, and the second one animates its exit from the slide. You can add multiple animations onto a single layer's track in the timeline if you wish, meaning you can have more than one animation on a single layer. We'll be covering animation in depth in future videos, but just know despite being a very simple layer-driven animation process, the variety of animations and level of control you actually have makes Slider Revolution incredibly powerful and capable of producing all kinds of animations from super simple to super complex. Okay, now that we've looked at the fundamentals of layers, let's go back to the top toolbar. In the middle of the top toolbar, you can see a small section of tools. These are layer tools, and they give you extra ways to work with layers quickly and efficiently. The first thing in the toolbar you see there is the type and name of the currently selected layer, which helps you to be sure you're working on the right one. The next tool can be used to copy, paste, and instantly duplicate layers. The solid trash can icon will instantly delete the currently selected layer. Be aware it won't prompt you with a confirmation warning though, so be careful with this one. The padlock icon allows you to lock layers so you can't accidentally make changes to them, or unlock them so you can. Make a habit of protecting your layers by locking them when you're not working on them, and you'll never accidentally change or delete them. The eyeball icon allows you to hide and unhide layers. The 2 arrows at the end allow you to quickly sort layers up or down. We already looked at how to manually sort layers by dragging and dropping earlier in the video. These arrows enable you to do the same thing that we did then, but without having to click and hold the actual layers in the timeline. On the far right of the top toolbar, just before the tabs of the sidebar, you'll see 5 more icons. The magnifying glass tool allows you to zoom in and out of the canvas. The arrow tool allows you to choose the behavior of your selection method. Hover over it and there are 3 selection options to choose from. The first menu item is the default selection tool. The add to selection and drag to select tools mimic what happens with the default selection tool if you hold down either Control or Shift while you're using it. For example, if I click on add to selection, I can now just click on multiple layers and they will all stay selected, which is the same as if I were using the default selection tool and held down Control to select those layers. Drag to select mimics holding Shift down while using the default selection tool. With drag to select, your cursor changes to a cross, allowing you to position it and drag a selection box across the canvas without holding Shift. If you'd rather use your keyboard shortcuts, when you press Ctrl or Shift on your keyboard, you will see the select tool icon in the top toolbar change to reflect your current selection method. Here I'm holding Ctrl down and you can see the icon has changed to add to select. Now I'm holding Shift and you can see the icon has changed to the drag to select icon. To the right of the selection tool is a circular arrow icon. This is the history tool. Hover over it and you'll see a drop-down menu with a list of the recent changes you've made. You can undo a recent change or redo something you undid. You can also scroll through the history that's there and click on any listed item to reset your module to the state it was at that time. Hover over the monitor icon and you'll see options to display the canvas at different screen sizes, which is helpful with responsive design. Click on Desktop, Notebook, tablet or mobile, and the canvas will resize, helping you to see how your design looks on the screen size of the related device. And the final icon, the question mark icon, is for getting help. If you click it, a blue tick will appear on the icon indicating Inline Help is active. Now, when you hover over a field in the module editor, the help function will offer you a description related to that field. The window that pops up also gives you links to related documentation as well as a search function so that you can search for additional help. Apart from displaying a pop-up window when you hover over a field that can obscure some of your work environment, leaving Inline Help active doesn't compromise the functionality of using slider revolution in any way, so you can leave it active and continue to work away as usual. And finally, at the bottom right of the module editor, you'll see a Save and a Preview button. Clicking Save will save all the changes you've made to your module. Clicking Preview will open a window that will show you what your module will look like when it's published. It's good practice to always save before you preview, otherwise you might find yourself previewing your previous save and not the current state of your module. And that's it for our closer look at slides, layers, and the module editor. Thanks for watching, and enjoy using Slider Revolution.
Start your Slider Revolution 6 experience now, the world's most powerful WordPress builder.